gang, to celebrate the first year of the Bosscinerator channel's first video, I welcome you to my first top 10 countdown, the top 10 boss fights I've reviewed in 2014. Now for a couple of rules, like I said, this is a countdown of boss fights from the games I've played this year, and those games are as follows. And finally, I will be abandoning the one boss per game rule because the game that bosses come from do not have any bearing on their individual quality. Plus, there was a lot I got through this year, so without further ado, let's get started. We're definitely starting this list off with a heavy hitter. Yes, it's the second Jetstream Sam fight from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Now, the rifle trope has been done a lot of times in video gaming history. I'm sure that some of the better ones still rock around in their players' memories. Ash and Luke from Tales of the Abyss, Terra from Mega Man 5, and Gary from Gen 1 Pokemon. And Jetstream Sam is no different. He was there in the beginning of the game, aiding the person who kidnapped the person that Ryan was protecting, and for some reason he was also sitting there when the kidnapped victim was brutally murdered. I still have no idea why they did that. Sundowner leaves the train and ends up being Jetstream Sam versus Ryan as the two people left riding. Raiden is then quickly defeated in his force failure situation and has his arm cut off with Jetstream's quick draw, which doesn't affect him in the slightest because he's a cyborg. Ryan avoids his death by dumb luck and Jetstream gets away. Of course, Jetstream wouldn't have made it to the top 10 if that was all he wrote. No, he comes back a couple of missions later before Ryan gets to World Marshal HQ. Through electronic advertisement boards, Jetstream Sam begins talking to Ryan philosophically. Odd, I know. He starts telling Ryan about how the people he's been thoughtlessly killing did indeed have free will in taking this job, but that's because most of them have been heavily affected by war and had no other options. Then he tells Ryan to listen. The police that come to defeat Ryan begin having their inner fears projected at Ryan, most of them containing the futility of their decision and the fear of their own death. It's a creepy story twist revealed at the perfect moment and was tied to a controlled breakdown that was able to tie player-to-player character incredibly well. He's not through yet. Jetstream Sam appears later after Ryan had destroyed World Marshal Denver on the road towards the Solace facility, and for some odd reason, Jetstream was able to find the exact road that Ryan was taking there. It must be all that tracking drug cartels giving him an infallible sense of direction. They have a 30-second banter before they decide that the random field next to this random road will be the perfect place to have their final battle. Okay, then, just going to accept that. The battle itself is pretty good if it's incredibly difficult. See, in this point of the game, the player hasn't necessarily been required to learn the terrible parrying system of this game, but with this fight, the gloves are thrown off, and if you don't get it, then prepare to enjoy your new career as ditch digger, because you'll be working for days to get yourself out of the hole your ass will be thrown into. Oddly enough, this doesn't make the battle terrible because the heavy difficulty of it is not acting as a bludgeon on your psyche, but actually as a hammer striking down and sharpening the skill into fine precision, which makes the inevitable victory extremely cathartic because you've finally beaten the terrible system at its own game. But what undoubtedly makes Jetstream Sam an amazing character and worthy of his spot in the countdown is his after-victory cutscene. It shows that Jetstream barely had any cybernetics on his body, meaning that the incredible skill that beat your ass into the ground on your first encounter was mostly coming from him, and that his signature sword was passed down from his father, humanizing the villain. And the cherry on top of this guy's character is that during the Senator Armstrong fight from the main game, Blade Wolf reveals what Jetstream had said to him before Ryan even showed up. Jetstream was completely prepared for this to be a do-or-die fight, and he didn't care who won. In an honorable fight, it doesn't matter who wins, they'll just go on. And the fact that he released his ID lock 2 hours after the fight means that if Ryan won, Jetstream had enough respect for his opponent to literally give his blade to the rightful victor. And for that level of respect he had for Ryan as a rival, I give Jetstream Sam my highest honors as a character and number 10 for best boss fight of 2014 for a great concept, perfection in character development, and being the one who finally handed down the concept of parrying to the player, which turns out to be incredibly useful if you know how to use it. Okay, hear me out when I talk about my choice for number 9 of the year because I do have my reasons for choosing it, but my pick for this spot had to be the Mi-24D helicopter fight in Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. Yes, this battle is against a generic helicopter right in the middle of a game-critical mission within the Nicaraguan military base. By itself, there's nothing really special about this boss. It's loaded up with rockets and a machine gun and flies above the arena with a few additional enemies around the battlefield. Pretty standard stuff for a game that could just not stop with these generic boss fights. Kojima, I know you can do better than copy-pasting a fight 8 times over the course of a game. They were designed poorly and committed the worst sin a boss fight can make, being completely boring. So why did I pick this one for a top 10 of the year alongside one of the greatest rival battles in gaming history? Well, to answer that, I'll have to take you to the mission that preceded it. Now at this point, Big Boss has reached the central communications of the base and found where Peace Walker was within it, but also set off an alarm alerting everyone to his location. Now this wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't stuffed butt to gut with a large amount of foes wielding dangerous weaponry. Rocket launchers, machine guns, these guys did not skimp on ammunition today unlike their breakfasts. The first room's not so bad, pretty standard, but then you get to the next one where the literal minute you walk out of the door you get blasted by an enemy's rocket that you couldn't see along with the machine gunner hiding right beside the entry. This is an unfair ambush that has prepared to kick your ass, and never mind that below there's another 5 guys hanging around, and then after that it's still not over. This mission ends in a time-closing corridor with 3 enemies spawning right behind you, blasting you, while you have to rush to the other side before getting an instant fail for missing the timer. This wouldn't be that bad if it wasn't for the fact that one of them has a rocket launcher. Take the unfairness that killed you several times in the first 2 rooms and ratchet it up to a level 11 and you've got the time corridor trap of this mission. But would you believe that there's an even more insidious trap in this mission that Kojima left? Because there is, and I'll get to it later. See, the reason I hold this generic boss in such high esteem is that it comes after 15 failures had in those ambush rooms before, and through all of that hell and being 3rd degree burned for all it's worth, this boss fight was actually enough to not only calm me down, but actually have some fun with it. The fight takes place in a room that's partially covered in a clear helipad outside. The cover does get broken down if hit by the helicopter's rockets, but thankfully it's not clearing out in a finger snap, but it takes some time to get it all gone. So there is some hiding available to the player in this fight. It kind of reminds me of the Kuramori battle where you end up sniping the Colossus from 3-story high windows. The boss itself is pretty stupid. It's AI taking it behind the base's tower for an insane period of time, which allows to get some airdropped health. Wait, this is still sounding like a terrible generic boss. I thought you said that this thing was fun. Well, it is, and here's the real reason. It's the music. The usual composed piece of music that Kojima puts in his games is put smack dab on this boss fight, and that piece is the powerful Heavens Divide. I dare you to sit down at this boss fight with that beautiful music playing, and see if you can't have any fun fighting this thing. Yes, it's slightly annoying and powerful, but it was the one thing that could take the player out of the hell that they've just experienced and calm down in order to meet the rest of the game, and that's why I put this fight in my number 9 spot of this year's countdown. But that doesn't mean I can excuse Kojima for putting 5 soldiers behind the fucking final door of the mission. I felt like I was handed a piece of candy, and then the same person punched me in the gut afterwards. What the fuck, Kojima? Seriously, what the holy hell were you thinking when you were designing this? You have this beautiful boss fight moment contrasting next to the hellish part of your game, and you decide to throw that all away just to troll your players? You know what? Fuck you, Kojima. Fuck you. Okay, let's move on. This is a candidate that would be more expected from the games that I've played this year if you watch my earlier work. It's one of the ones that's raved about all the time from people who played this game for being intense, exciting, and one of the examples of this concept done so well. My number 8 spot belongs to Avian from Shadow of the Colossus. Oh yeah, we're getting up to the heavy hitters now! Now, Avian has topped a lot of others' top 10 lists, some involving only Shadow of the Colossus, some just in general, which goes to show how this stone bird has touched a lot of the audience, including me. Avian encapsulates a lot of what makes Shadow of the Colossus such a great game. The majestic landscapes, the simple controls and concepts with intuitive design, and finally, its overall point. It's no secret what the overall message of Shadow of the Colossus is, the futility that can sometimes be present in a hero's quest, the consequences of killing these colossi for your own goals, and that even though they are monstrous in size, they're also just minding their own damn business and should be left alone. See, Avian needs to be shot with an arrow to actually start the fight. Otherwise, the giant bird will just sit on its perch going about its day. It's Wander that's the aggressor and causes this fight to happen, and Avian's just defending itself. However, the way it defends itself is pretty damn awesome. Avion's usual attack is to start with a wing tackle that gives Wander a great way to climb onto Avion's body while it takes off. And with Shadow of the Colossus' incredible controls that puts the player in the action because it's so realistic, the feeling of being on a flying creature is incredibly intense, especially with the consequence of failing on grip, being a 20-foot fall into the pool below and having to start all over again. And on top of that, the intensity gets knocked up a notch when you have to move to Avion's wings to strike their sigils. These things are not easy to hold on to because Avion needs to, fly. So getting to them is difficult when airborne all the freaking time. Adding to the atmosphere of this battle is that Avion cannot defend itself when Wander is on its back. All it can do is, well, Then there's the death scene of Avion. When Avion is killed, it will fall slowly down with smoke trailing from its final moments before crashing and slowly submerging itself into the lake below. This slow sequence actually allows the player to do some thinking about the travesty of killing the magnificent bird who ended up only being an unfortunate stepping stone on the road to reviving Wander's pretty lady. Atmospheric, incredible combat, and a showcase of how Shadow of the Colossus' intuitive controls can add to the connection between player and player character and the overall atmosphere that I was talking about before. This fight has it all, really, if not for being threatening in the slightest. This won't be the last Colossus we see on this countdown, I guarantee it. Damn, that escalated quickly. My next choice on this top 10 is Gaius from Shadow of the Colossus, or as I like to call it, the Pillar Swordsman. How could I not put this guy on the list? Who else uses a pillar as a weapon? Well, except for Sundowner. Gaius was the third boss of Shadow of the Colossus, and if Valis wasn't enough to tell you that this game wasn't gonna fuck around, then Gaius was a pretty loud wake-up call. Now, where would you expect to fight a swordsman in a video game? Usually in small segregated areas, since swordsmen need tight quarters to get into melee range to stab you up the butt. So you'd think that, hey, maybe this guy's in a small forest clearing, or maybe some stone platform has a piece of ruins or something. Well, you'd be all wrong in a bag of chips. We actually fight Gaius up there. Yep, we gets to climb all the way up to a giant platform jutting out of a lake. The platforming here is as finicky as crap, and Shadow of the Colossus is admittedly terrible. Jumping mechanics come back with a terrible vengeance, as the wall jump to finish this portion will undoubtedly send you screaming and flailing down into the lake more times than your gamer pride can stand. But eventually the game will let you pass the velvet rope and show Gaius in as much wonder and greatness a pile of rocks can muster. Yeah, the other two Colossi you fought up till now have been walking around for a long period of time minding their own business, but Gaius was just sitting there all this time, probably sleeping in that giant rock pile. But then he gets up and starts pounding down at the creature that woke him up. Thankfully, this fight never throws a perimeter hazard into the mix, since this platform is so large yet entirely supported by a small central earth pillar with a 20-foot tall stone statue walking around and bashing at the platform this entire time. I'm surprised Wander survived this fight, but what this fight does have is a strange stone disc randomly put there for no real reason. It has to be involved in this fight somehow. And so it is, said Captain Obvious. See, the Gaius statue before Wander has some semblance of extra armor on its body, and in order to get onto it, Wander has to somehow strip the giant of that protection. This part of the fight admittedly stinks because it is so damn obvious, because Gaius doesn't attack using a regular sword style, but instead uses it like a delinquent garbage collector using a pointy stick, and he just stabs the ground with the tip of his pillar. So after 5 seconds, you can usually put 2 and 2 together and realize that Gaius needs to strike the disc in order to progress the fight. After that, it's the same climb up and stab mechanic that defines this game and some boss fights in the Castlevania series I'm not going to mention. But what makes it unique is that the climb has to start on Gaius' sword, and one of his weak spots is on the top of his head, which is always a good idea in the game because it gives a certain realization and a weight to the action by literally going in for a brain kill, along with a great view to give sense of the size of the killed creature. Gaius earns his place because of the great weight of the battle, the unique scenario creating by fighting a pillar swordsman, and overall just being a solidly built battle that I'm sure some of his players will have wanted longer, and that's when you know a boss has done a good job. But let's see who did one better. Seriously, cuz? 3 in a row? Yeah, sorry about that, but my number 6 spot belongs to Phalanx from Shadow of the Colossus. The usual top pick for the best boss of this game only managed to do slightly better than Gaius. So why is this boss so highly respected in the realms of Sonic players? Well, it could be that this boss is starting the late game stuff and our mission is beginning to come to a close, leading into a few boss fights that are difficult while the rest of the game has been easy to mildly irritating. And that gives the game some leniency to throw some gimmicks at us and change up the gameplay while retaining the tight controls that make everything come together so spectacularly. Even if sometimes the developers had no idea what they were doing and did gimmicks for gimmicks' sake. Or it could be that this is one of the rare aerial battles from this game, and as we've seen before, Team Ico really makes those battles come to life with the realistic controls, making hanging on during flight an incredibly intense experience. Plus, in what other game could you possibly have jumping from a horse at full gallop onto a creature's wing while it's taking off? If there is one, it isn't even close to the greatness than just doing this to get on the phalanx. Not even close. However, the general consensus of why this fight is so great comes from its meaning towards the plot. If you bring up Shadow of the Colossus and ask a person who's completed it about it, 9 times out of 10, within their description will come the phalanx fight, and that's because it is the pinnacle of what the game is trying to be in its ultimate meaning. This battle starts with Phalanx flying out of the desert, supposedly sleeping exactly like Gaius, but was just under the sand, and throughout the entire fight, Phalanx does not attack. Not even once does it try to seek direct harm to Wander, the person who's been climbing all over and stabbing the great creature in its vital organs. Take into account the juxtaposition of this Colossus being both the biggest of the 16 and also the least deadly, and you have one of the best showcases of a shameful battle towards the player that you'll ever see. This creature wakes up after centuries of slumber just to have you shoot it essentially in its windpipe, climb all over its body to stab it in the heart, lungs, and brain just so you can have your sweet lady back. It's a battle that when finished just fills the player with feelings of disgust, shame, and depression because Wander's forced actions have led to the death of a creature who never, ever deserved to be brutally killed. And why? Just so he can have his betrothed back from the dead. I hope you're happy, Wander, because I'm sure as hell not. And that's why Phalanx deserves his props, and you know the funny thing is that we're only halfway done with this list. I'm sure most of you out there with your own internet boxes are going to feel kicked in the brain with my next choice. For number 5 on this top 10 list of the year, we get to have a second look at the Fury from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. The odd thing about this game was it had a comparable issue to the Mega Man franchise when it came to its boss lineups. There were the good, there were the bad, and then there was the downright atrocious. And the best that this game ever had were a lot better than they had to be, which made me think that while Kojima was working on this, rather than working on every boss equally, he just gutted the development time from the mediocre fights to dump into the other ones. But for an auteur like Hideo Kojima, I wouldn't be freaking surprised. This brings us to the Fury, one of the Cobra unit acting as the generic terrorist organization boss generator for MGS3, and here we have one of the oddest motherfuckers among them. This guy, obviously enough, used to be involved in the Soviet space program before a problem occurred with his craft and he came crashing down to Earth in a huge fireball which ignited, pardon the phrase, his pyromania which created that. His obsession with fire is going to drive this entire fight along with making it one of the best fights from the game. When I originally reviewed this guy, I said that this was the closest I was going to get to the outside of the actual game to see a Dark Soulsian boss. One of those completely overpowered boss that keeps his difficulty in check somehow. His battle script involves him using his twin flamethrowers and his jetpack to cause widespread continuous fire damage to both you and the entire arena, which is basically 3 half-divided hallways with no lights. The great thing about this fight is that because of the lack of visibility, the Fury can't see you unless you make a mistake and allow yourself to be caught, which will lead to the entire hallway he sees you and becoming more inflamed than the Burning Man effigy. Yes, I went there. These flames deal heavy impact damage with a really annoying continuous effect until Big Boss stops, drops, and rolls and gets the fuck off of him. In this fight, Big Boss has to constantly shoot at the Fury in order to rip the protective spacesuit he always wears. Yes, he always wears his spacesuit, but that's not important, and since this guy is essentially the Human Torch, without that he'd burn to death. Also, the lines that he says when he's being shot repeatedly are hilarious. Yeah. This fight is butt-fuck hard, but it's also fair since the trigger for the Fury's attacks rely entirely on your sneaking skills with the game. And the man's got enough of a personality to be interesting for a one-shot encounter, and is just a solidly designed boss with a great concept and amazing battle script. I just wish Kojima could have shared the love around with his development time, and unfortunately, we have to deal with the guys who got jilted on time along with the ones that were able to rise above in the future. The Fury gets killed and his body is engulfed in flames, and then as a final attempt to kill Big Boss, his body transforms into a meteor and misses Big Boss in order to smash into a locked door. Wait, what? That's awesome! Awesome enough to be put in my fucking intro. Now who could possibly top this? Well... nostalgia is a requirement of our kind. Sometimes it can be done well, in Super Mario Galaxy 2's Throwback Galaxy's case, and other times it can be done badly like the mop scene from DMC Devil May Cry, and other regretful times it can be done in the most abysmal way possible like the Screaming Mantis case. But in the case of our number 4 pick, this is where the game hit it straight out of the park for a grand slam, and the batter for that comes from Metal Gear Ray from Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. This fight comes at the end of a long mission that I'm sure many players wish it could have been longer, because the mission was done specifically to throw all nostalgia at the wall and 99% of it stuck. The start of the mission even has us in a dream sequence where we replay the original first sneak session from Metal Gear Solid. After that, we are dropped into a remastered Shadow Moses Island to begin the mission of refinding Metal Gear Rex. Oh, you mean that giant mech that got its power source blown off and then its CPU shot to hell before the military came to destroy the entire island? Yes, that's the robot we're looking for. I suppose that whoever the general was at the end of Metal Gear Solid didn't go through with his plan to bomb the crap out of the place. Anyway, the layout of this place is kept painstakingly the same as it was back in the PSX days without all the bullcrap objective flags to get around, along with some nostalgic boss attempts from Crying Wolf and Vamp before we get to the robot somehow functional and standing before leaving at Shadow Moses' docks. But before we get the chance, a Metal Gear Ray jumps from the water and stands there challenging Rex and Solid Snake with a final battle. As with the rest of the mission, the source material for this boss fight was kept exactly the same as in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, with the weapons of both Rex and Ray being exactly the same. Rex gets its machine gun, laser, and rockets, while Ray gets its hydraulic cannon, machine gun, and laser. This battle gets a lot of atmosphere going from this section's controls being one of the few vehicle sections of the franchise, and the way that the weapons fire down to how the screen shakes whenever Rex makes a stride really makes the player feel that they're actually driving the beast that beat them down time and again nearly a decade ago. And with the moderate use of cover and a fair difficulty from Liquid Ocelot, this fight has almost everything going for it. Even the QTE special moves that both Rex and Ray are able to pull makes this battle the well-rounded nostalgic smackdown worthy of number 4 in this countdown as the only mech-to-mech fight seen in the Metal Gear franchise.
Revolver Ocelot.
Sorry, we're not actually looking for you. We're looking for your younger self.
This time I've got 12 shots.
Actually, it's not you either. There's actually another fight with this guy that did it a lot better. Yep, number 3 of 2014 actually goes to the second Major Ocelot fight from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and its technical final boss fight. Since this game was a prequel and the first game in the Big Boss canon of the franchise, this is the first time we got to see Major Ocelot before he grew up and became Revolver Ocelot from Metal Gear Solid, and then Liquid Ocelot in Metal Gear Solid 2 while he was still cutting his teeth with the Cobra unit. Major Ocelot is a strange mishmash to review because he does go through a great arc in MGS3, but it's always off to the side and we aren't given the full picture of what he's going through, and instead we just get glimpses. Our first meeting with the mercenary was just after we rescued Sokolov from the abandoned building, and he came in as an attempt to stop Big Boss. But unfortunately for him, he wasn't skilled with his own weapon to constitute much of a threat, which allows Big Boss to escape after he gave Major Ocelot some advice on his choice of pistol. Later we meet up again in a small clearing where Major Ocelot took Big Boss's advice and got a couple army revolvers, allowing him to use his actual skill set, and the boss fight here is admittedly pretty good and actually pretty humorous with the beehive available for shooting. The tone of this fight is just great fun. We don't see him again until we get to the main building's dock, and Major Ocelot has some fun with Sokolov when he starts juggling and playing Russian roulette at the same time. That's amazing. Then, after we get captured by the boss, during the torture, Major Ocelot pulls out one of his revolvers to test Eva, Big Boss's ally, by reperforming his Russian roulette juggling, but before he can get to the bullet, Big Boss decides to interrupt Major Ocelot, and while he's off balance, he ends up shooting Big Boss right into his eyeball. Youch! Our next encounter has him being ordered to help Colonel Vol'jin during their boss fight, but instead Major Ocelot actually helps Big Boss to win by supplying us during the fight, which is pretty pointless since it's a CQC fight, but whatever, it's the thought that counts. He's then, for some reason, in the convoy of troops that combine with the Shagohod during the game's great chase scene. I don't know why he's doing this, but it's clear he ran out of logic halfway through planning the motorcycle chase. After defeating the Shagohod and the boss, we finally get on Eva's wig in order to attempt to escape, but they're stopped by Major Ocelot, who took a flying troop's chair and smashed it into the plane just so he could have a fist fight with Big Boss. After a minute or two of fighting, Big Boss agrees to Major Ocelot's idea of playing another game of Russian roulette with 2 revolvers and 1 bullet, the one that Major Ocelot kept on his person throughout this entire game. After 6 shots, one of the guns goes off and the cutscene shows that the bullet Major Ocelot had been so protective of was actually a blank. He laughs and then jumps from the wig, allowing Big Boss to escape with the removed weight. The reason why this fight gets its high props from me is that it is the finalization of Major Ocelot's arc in this game, and a similar reason to why Jetstream Sam is on this list: character respect. After their first encounter in the ruined building, all Major Ocelot has wanted from Big Boss is just another chance to have a legitimate fight with the mercenary who he's actually become friends with over all this time, because the only way you can make friends in this type of story is with duels to the death. It's a huge rule. Ocelot's become obsessed with this goal, as can be seen by joining in the chase with a homicidal Vol'jin and taking a truce vehicle and crashing it into a plane, all just so he can have his standoff with no one needing to die in it. Big Boss and Major Ocelot actually became really great friends through this, and it proves their friendship in later parts of the canon, and it's all because they had the respect for each other to have this short Russian roulette game, a worthy opponent, and a great character. Major Ocelot truly deserves to get this high on the list. We're almost to number 1, so I won't keep you waiting. Aw yes, we're back to Metal Gear Solid 4, and I'm sure that means most of you can guess what my number 2 choice is gonna be, because you're absolutely right. It's Liquid Ocelot from Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. From all that talk for number 4 about nostalgia, this game from an early point onwards is basically built on the nostalgic elements from the previous games, and it's no different here with the game's final boss. See, this concept is actually copied from the original Metal Gear Solid game. After the downfall of Rex, leaves only Liquid and Solid Snake on top of the defeated robot, ready to have a final punch-up before the building gets bombed straight to hell. This fight is terrible. It's poorly designed, and with the small space, it makes it hard to work with and dodge, and add in that there's no invisible walls, and every fall off the side means that you'll be hanging on trying to get back up, and you've got a short fight that should have been edited out altogether. Plus, the incredibly short checkpoint between fights makes it seem like the fight shouldn't even be there since there's no consequences for failure. However, thankfully Kojima took that idea and ramped it up from last-minute disaster to a nostalgia-fueled knockout with the Liquid Ocelot fight. Now, the fight does recycle point for point, but what it adds into the original formula is what makes it such a masterpiece. You've got the incredibly simple controls and the atmosphere-building impact system that makes it seem like every punch that's flying is heavy and realistic, giving a lot of credit to the fact that the two combatants are incredibly exhausted at this point of always being in combat. They're both weary, and this is both of their final stands. It's gritty, realistic, and incredibly well done, along with picking a good difficulty level for their final battle. Now, in this fight, Liquid is no slouch and has a lot of the advantage since Solid Snake has literally been microwaved to near death about 3 minutes ago. So Liquid's hits are for heavy damage, but this is balanced slightly by having a lot of QTE combo attacks that can give Solid Snake the upper hand. The battle's great, but what really makes the nostalgia intertwined with the fight is that the health bars for both of them are constantly changing to different games' colors when advancing in phases, along with Liquid Snake changing attack styles based on the 3 people he is currently. Along with that, in each phase there's also a different music track playing from previous games to give the player that extra fan service, which is always a nice touch. The battle leads up to the final phase, where the song changes to something reserved and honorable, where the game actually takes control to give the final beatdown to Liquid Ocelot for you. But again, the fighting style and impacts makes these final blows almost the heaviest of them all, and Solid Snake is throwing them with all the strength he barely has, but he does manage to finally put the final nail in Liquid's grave, but not before Liquid Ocelot gives a final Major Ocelot gesture to his rival's clone. The nostalgia stuffed into this fight could have easily been shameless, overdone, and pointless, but the way that it's intertwined with the combat changes actually makes it seem well choreographed and curated when this fight was put together, and is well appreciated even when the fight has a small hiccup here and there. I don't know who would bash this fight, but it was able to pull together heavy combat tied with nostalgic elements and give some well-deserved one-upsmanship to the Liquid Snake fight from MGS. But while this boss fight did everything right, there was one boss that I'd like just a little better. Judging from the list of games that I've played this year, I'm sure that some of you can tell exactly where I'm going with this one based on that alone. It's the fight that did everything right, an amazing location, concept, and battle script with a one-shot character chock full of an intriguing character that keeps the player interested, all paired with a style that is rare to see. It's the only fight I've ever given a perfect score within this entire year, and that honor belongs to the greatest boss I've fought in 2014. The End from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. I'm sorry guys, but I had to go with the obvious choice on this one, and how could I not? The End is the absolute pinnacle of perfection and has been seen on multiple top video game bosses lists outside of this one. Even the sole top 100 video games bosses list has The End sat right on the top. The reason for his critical acclaim comes first from what The End is. He's a sniper called the father of sniping, and for good reason. His camouflage is impeccable, his aim is still as sharp as a fresh tack, and his tact for tracking and hiding are the best. And he's actually supernatural with his ability to photosynthesize and insta-kill the player. As a sniper, you'd expect the location his fight takes place in would have a lot of cover and spread out over a large area. And you'd be entirely right, but what you didn't expect was that his battlefield spans 3 different screens, being one of the biggest boss arenas I've ever seen, where the only fight music is the sounds of the forest that surround you, which is the best decision they could have gone for, since this fight can easily last for close to an hour if you haven't had the good fortune of stumbling upon the infrared goggles. Thankfully, the game relents a bit in this fight and actually puts a sniper rifle for you somewhere in the map that's accessible and not hidden under a random stump or somewhere off camera, but from that required weapon, beyond that you can go hog wild with the ways you can try and find the End. You can track his footprints if you're lucky enough to find some, just don't get them confused with your own tracks, trust me. You can try and find his sight's reflection using binoculars. You can track him with the shots he's firing at you if you're the insane type of player, since he's only shooting tranq darts that diminish your stamina instead of your health, or you can use your directional microphone to track his literal breathing. This is the type of fight that says you can use whatever approach you want and freaking means it. Pull out all the stops because the End is just as merciless. However, the End is not a bloodthirsty monster in this encounter, but rather an earnest century-old man who only wants to feel the thrill of the hunt once more, hoping that his final prey, Big Boss, can give him a great challenge worthy of his impressive skills. And I actually believe his intent, judging from the fact that he's not firing bullets at you, and his instant kill attack actually doesn't restart the battle from the beginning. And from his humanizing scene where the Cobra unit just leaves the End outside on the dock to enjoy the outdoors in his slumber, before they get him back inside, allowing the more cowardly player to take him out before their encounter, along with an old age death allowed, if the player decides that waiting a week rather than an hour is worth more of their time. But honestly, if any player legitimately does this, I not only despise their decision, but also pity them, as they'll miss out on one of the best encounters in the freaking universe. The achievement that you get whenever you find this guy's hiding place or outsmart the End cannot be understated, since these happen on average every 5 or 10 minutes of intense looking, knowing that it's more likely that the End has spotted you and has been watching you run around like a headless chicken hilariously, getting in a few good chuckles with his pet parrot. But after the grueling hunting the hunter gameplay, eventually you're able to get the final blow in, and the End's death scene shows him accepting his death and telling Big Boss that he respects him as the person that has ended his life, being a true test of skill. And that losing to a greater opponent is the most honorable way to go out, and he dies as an honorable and respectable character and human being. The End is my best boss fight of 2014 for being the pinnacle example of characterization, design, implementation, and achieving gameplay surrounded by a great story that has stolen the admiration from almost all its players. The only possible criticism I could give is that this fight has an incredibly arbitrary length and has a luck-based stance. But honestly, it's all part and parcel with the perfection that is the MGS3 Sniper boss battle. I'm Kaz the Bosscinerator, and I hope to see you all around next year as another bevy of boss fights are handed down from me to you. But until then, I'll leave you as I always do, with a victory for gamers. Have a good one.